Nobody at that wedding even looked at her. Not once. She was 7 years old, sitting in a wheelchair at the edge of a garden full of laughing, dancing, celebrating adults, and not a single person stopped to ask if she was okay. This is the story of a little girl who was invisible at her own family's wedding, and the one stranger who saw her. Now here's what gets me. This little girl wasn't just any guest. She was the daughter of the man who owned the company that paid for half the people at that wedding. And still, not one person sat with her. Not one person brought her a plate of food. Not one person even smiled in her direction. But one man did. And what happened next changed both of their lives forever. Her name was Lily. She was 7, small for her age, with big brown eyes and a white dress her dad had bought special for the occasion. She had a flower crown on her head that she'd picked herself. Daisies. Because daisies were her favorite. Her father, Richard Calloway, was one of the most powerful men in the city. He'd built his tech company from nothing, literally from a one-bedroom apartment, with a broken heater and a second-hand laptop. By the time Lily was born, he was worth more money than most people could count. His name was on buildings. His face was in magazines. But Lily didn't care about any of that. She just wanted her dad to hold her hand sometimes. Richard loved his daughter. That part was never in question. But Richard was also a man who never stopped moving. There was always a call to take, a deal to close, a flight to catch. He had hired the best nurses, the best doctors, the best everything. Because Lily had been in a wheelchair since she was 3, after an accident that Richard never talked about. Not ever. So when his younger brother Marcus got married that July, Richard brought Lily along. He thought it would be good for her. Fresh air, family, a reason to smile. What he didn't think about was that he would get pulled into a conversation with investors the second he walked through the gate. And that those conversations would stretch and stretch and stretch, and Lily would be sitting alone at a table near the back watching everyone else dance. Daniel Mercer was not supposed to be at that wedding. He'd been invited as a last-minute addition, a +1 for a friend who bailed. At the last second, Daniel almost didn't come either. He was tired. He was always tired. He was a single dad to a 9-year-old boy named Sam, and tired was basically his permanent setting at that point. His wife had passed 2 years earlier. Cancer. Fast and cruel, the way it always is. And since then, Daniel had been doing everything alone. The school runs, the doctor's appointments, the bedtime stories, the bad days, the worst days. He worked as a high school history teacher, which meant he wasn't making a lot of money, but he made enough. And he was the kind of man who showed up. Always. He almost didn't show up that day. But something made him get in the car, put on the one suit that still fit, drive 40 minutes to a garden wedding where he didn't really know anyone. And when he got there, the first thing he noticed, before the flowers, before the fairy lights, before the open bar, was a little girl sitting alone in a wheelchair, watching everyone else like she was watching a movie she wasn't allowed to be in. He got a drink. He told himself it wasn't his business. He looked over again. She was still there, still alone, still quiet. He got a plate of food from the buffet. He looked over a third time. She was trying to reach a glass of water that someone had placed just slightly, too far from her. Just a few inches out of reach, and she was straining, quietly, not making a sound, not asking for help, just trying on her own. Daniel put down his plate, walked over, moved the glass closer to her. She looked up at him with those big brown eyes and said nothing. He said, "May I sit with you?" She blinked, like she was waiting for the catch, like she was sure he was going to sit down for 30 seconds and then leave. He sat down. He didn't leave. They talked for almost 2 hours. Daniel found out her name was Lily, that her favorite color was green, that she loved dinosaurs, specifically the Ankylosaurus, because, and this was her exact reasoning, it had armor, and a tail like a weapon, and that was just the coolest combination possible. He could not argue with that. He told her about Sam, about how Sam also loved dinosaurs and had a very strong opinion that the Spinosaurus was underrated and deserved more respect. Lily said she agreed. She said most people only talked about T-Rex, and that was boring. They ate together. He refilled her water without being asked. He didn't talk to her like she was fragile. He didn't stare at the wheelchair. He just talked to her like she was a person, which she was, and which apparently not enough people remembered. At one point, Lily laughed, really laughed, at something Daniel said about his failed attempt to bake a birthday cake for Sam that came out looking like a geological disaster. And Richard Calloway, across the garden, heard that laugh. He stopped mid-sentence. He turned around, and he saw his daughter, his quiet, careful, always too still daughter, laughing with a stranger at a table in the back. He excused himself from the conversation. He walked over slowly, not wanting to interrupt. He stood a few feet away and just watched for a moment. Watched Lily talk with her hands the way she did when she was excited. Watched her lean forward in her chair. watched her look comfortable in a way she rarely looked in public. Then Daniel noticed him standing there and stood up to introduce himself. Richard shook his hand and said, "I'm Lily's father." Daniel nodded. He didn't say anything about finding her alone. He didn't make Richard feel bad. He just said, "She's been great company." Richard looked at his daughter, and something moved across his face. Something between gratitude and guilt and the particular kind of pain that comes when you realize you've been missing something important right in front of you. He sat down at the table too. The three of them sat there together until the sun went down. That was not the end of the story. Richard Calloway was not a man who let things go. A week after the wedding, he tracked down Daniel's contact information through the friend who'd invited him. He called him. He said, "I want to say thank you, properly." Daniel said it wasn't necessary. Richard said, "My daughter asked about you 3 times since the wedding. She never asked about anyone." They met for coffee, then again. Then their kids met, and Sam and Lily immediately started arguing about which dinosaur was superior, which meant they were going to be friends forever. Richard offered Daniel a position at his company, a well-paying role creating educational content for a learning platform he was building. Daniel thought about it for a long time. Then he said yes. But here's the part that matters most. Richard Calloway restructured his entire schedule after that wedding, cut 2 standing meetings that had been eating his evenings, blocked out time, real, protected time, every single day for Lily. Not because Daniel told him to, not because anyone pressured him, but because he'd seen, with his own eyes, what it looked like when someone gave his daughter their full attention. And he realized, standing in that garden watching a stranger do what he should have been doing, that no company deal, no investor call, no magazine cover was ever going to be worth missing that. Lily got her flower crown framed. It still hangs in her room. And on the wall next to it, she taped a handwritten note. It says, "Daniel asked if he could sit with me. He stayed." 7 words. But sometimes 7 words are everything. If this story hit you somewhere deep, hit that subscribe button. The next one on screen right now might just make you cry harder.